The Sun, Lord of Mysteries, Fanfiction, Chapter 61-70. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 61, Ancient Sun God. Speaking is prohibited here. Before Adam could finish his prophecy, Audiobook declared. The dimming light of the cross, on the other hand, brightened and illuminated the surroundings. Except for Audiobook, attacks of other gods had ceased. Unlike him, who is present here, Ammonizes and Leodoro, who are fighting battles in the sky and sea of ruins, cannot send their power down here indefinitely. On the illusory and ethereal surface of the light that illuminated the surroundings, words began to take shape. The historical projection of Lucas Reyes dissipated as the summoning time limit expired. Audiobook declared that speaking is forbidden here, but that doesn't mean Adam can't complete his prophecy in other ways. Audiobook noticed that his projection was becoming dim and illusory. He, on the other hand, ignored it and declared once more. All prophecies are null and void. The words on the illusory sea of light's surface faded away, as did the sea of light. There was no longer a golden cross or white swords, instead, there was a massive yet illusory bone dragon. Adam stood beneath the bone dragon. As his golden iris shone with light, he looked at the bone dragon. Through his uniqueness, Adam began to use the authority of visionary. He intended to give life to the bone dragon temporarily. A terrifying aura filled with madness erupted from the bone dragon. The dragon's hollow eyes were lit up with an illusory light that shimmered like flames. When Audiobook saw the bone dragon, he cursed in his mind. He made another declaration without hesitation. Acts of giving life are prohibited here. However, before he could even establish the order with reality, he sensed it becoming void. Simultaneously, a phantom of divine dragon began to materialize around the bone dragon. Soon after, a majestic divine dragon appeared, with silver scales around most of its body and golden scales from under its neck. The dragon had massive wings that seemed to be able to cover the entire sky. It also had numerous golden and white horns that adorned its head. Anklewelt, Dragon of Imagination. Ads by Pubfuture. Roar. A terrifying draconic roar echoed around the world, and everyone, whether gods fighting in the Sea of Ruins or the King of Angels who were already focusing here, stared in astonishment at the divine dragon. Shit. Fuck. Audiobook cursed repeatedly as he felt the gaze of the divine dragon, which is actually under the control of Adam. However, before he could do anything, he noticed that everything was fading into eternal darkness. He was immediately aware of what had occurred. He'd been attacked by Adam and the remnant power left behind in the corpse of ancient God. Before succumbing to endless darkness, the last of his consciousness had only one thought. I fucking hate visionary, _. Audiobook awoke, gasping for air. It took him a few moments to get his breathing under control. Then the realization hit him, and his face became solemn. He was in the valley between two mountains. The path ahead is rocky and rugged. Most importantly, despite the fact that the sky was bright, there was no sun visible. Audiobook had reverted to his teenage self. He was dressed in ragged robes. His face was dirty, and his hair was messy and unclean. The ragged robes were torn in many places, revealing his skinny body, which was covered in scars all over. He was holding various sun pathway Beander characteristics. This is the Eastern continent during the Second Epoch. This is also one of the most significant events in his life. This is where his life and fate were forever altered. Subconsciously, he always recalls this memory. Audiobook turned around to see ugly and ferocious demons charging at him, baring their yellow and sharp teeth. As they approached his figure, their eyes were filled with malice and hunger. Despite the fact that nothing was different from reality, he knew this was a dream. He was aware of it instinctively. This was the moment in his life when he was forced into desperation. He was almost convinced that he was going to die or lose himself. He still clearly recalls his teenage self fleeing the oncoming horde of demons while clutching the characteristics in his hand. The demons were far more powerful than him, and all he could do at the time was flee. It drove him to despair, to the point where he didn't care about the consequences and instead wanted to combine with the characteristics in order to have silver of chance. But that's when his life changed, because he happened to run into someone at that exact moment. Ads by Pubfuture. Audiobook ignored the demons and looked ahead. His eyes were filled with complex emotions. A man stood not far from him. He was dressed in black clergy robes, with a silver cross around his neck. He had golden eyes that burned like the sun. He held a black slate in his hands. Ancient sun god, Acaces looked at Creator, whose gaze was fixed on him. Unlike in his memories, the Creator's eyes were indifferent and apathetic. He already knew that the Creator had recognized him, as his reflection in the eyes of the Creator was not his teenage self, but his present self. Then, he noticed the Creator turn around and walk away without looking back. The Creator abandoned him and left him to die. This thought appeared out of nowhere in his mind, causing his emotions to spiral out of control. He was filled with rage, regret, pain, and rage. These emotions erupted in his mind, corrupting him. However, his figure emitted an infinite amount of pure light, as if he had become the sun that descended into the world. Under the light's illumination, everything melted. The entire dream world started to crack as well. Acaces rose from the cracked ground, his face calm and indifferent, as the sun flares burned away all of Adam's influence. "Adam," he said in low voice, "you really have some powerful tricks up your sleeve, don't you? However, it's my turn, Adam. Let me give you a taste of your own medicine." A balanced scale appeared in his hands as a dreadful shimmer of light swept the dream world with the authority of order. The dream world changed under the authority of order, revealing an astral world riddled with cracks and fissures. A massive golden sun stood in the middle of the astral world, but it was slowly dimming, as if it might extinguish at any moment. The sun was surrounded by gods and king of angels except the white angel, all of whom were battered and bruised. Their eyes were filled with a myriad of emotions, but they all shared one similarity: fear. Inside the sun, Acaces floated towards the Creator, who was kneeling in an infinite ocean of light. The Creator's body emitted infinite amount of light, while also breaking and collapsing. Ads by PubFuture. "What are you doing here, Acaces?" the Creator asked, his voice worn and tired. However, he was cut off, as a white sword stabbed into his chest and pierced into his heart, draining his remaining life. "I'm sorry, my lord," Acaces spoke, but his tone was cold and his eyes were indifferent. "Ausis, the Creator yelled, and the entire astral world trembled in response to his rage. Just then, a calm yet powerful voice spoke up. "Enough, Acaces." The entire dream world built by authority of order collapsed with that voice. In the realm of the mind, where only thoughts and dreams exist, Acaces stood in the midst of a constantly changing environment. "What are you waiting for?" he said. "I'm not going to give you a grand welcome every time, like I did for you back then." A figure appeared in front of him. It wasn't Adam, but ancient sun god. With a gentle smile, the Creator stood before him. Despite looking at Acaces, his golden eyes were still filled with kindness. "When did you find out?" Acaces asked in low voice. "I knew it the moment I saw you, Acaces." The Creator replied gently. "I watched you grow up and also raised you. I know more about you than you realize, Acaces. Also, you didn't even bother to hide it." "That is debatable," Acaces chuckled, "given how you reacted after I stabbed you through the heart." "It was a different time, Acaces." The Creator stated. "You can probably guess what happened at that point." "So, it is indeed Almighty," Acaces muttered. "Yes." The Creator smiled and nodded. "The Primordial One tampered with my omniscience. You've also changed a lot." The Creator continued, his golden eyes fixed on Acaces. "Different yet similar to your past self. I get that a lot these days." As he raised the Grossel Travels in his hands, Acaces spoke. "However, I still lost to you. Don't give up," the Creator said. "Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to win in the end." "Is that a prophecy?" Acaces inquired, his brows raised. "It's a blessing," the Creator said gently, as he waved his hand. The historical projection began to fade. "Do you ever regret it?" Acaces inquired as his figure began to fade away. "Saving me back then?" The Creator smiled, but did not respond as he watched the historical projection fade away. He took the Grossel Travels and walked ahead into the infinite expanse of light. Chapter 62, Cheek. Northern Continent. Ammonizes took the characteristics of the Prince of Abolition and put them in her kingdom. While Acaces held the black crown, the uniqueness of Black Emperor. Suddenly, Acaces fell into a trance as memories of the fight flooded his mind. He smiled wryly, as he considered the words of Creator. The Creator especially blessed him. He honestly didn't know what to think about it. Moving on, he is also not surprised that Creator was able to find that he knew his identity and has seen though his disguise of Adam. As he stated, this has nothing to do with power. He really knew him very well. Akasis was well aware that this would be revealed in some way in the future. So, this came as no surprise to him. He now has an educated guess as to how much Adam truly possesses, and this guess doesn't include Chaos C. All he can say is that Adam is freaking powerful. He really hates Visionary. But he understands why the creator chose the Visionary path. It has too many advantages for him, as he said in original timeline, and it's truly the best way for one to become God Almighty in the end. N-O-V-E in .c Ohm. He, on the other hand, was not the type to back down in the face of an impossible challenge just like this. He would not have been able to become who he is now if he had been someone like that. Finally, he was also free of the doubt that had plagued him for so long. As he got the answer from the Creator. The Creator possessed omniscience, so why wasn't he aware of his betrayal beforehand? If he had known about it, he would not have reacted the way he did when he stabbed him in the heart. Now, Akasis has the answer. It's because God Almighty tampered with the Creator's omniscience, leaving the Creator in the dark about the betrayal of his angels. But this only raised more questions in his mind. Why would the Almighty do such a thing? After all, the Creator was on the verge of becoming a pillar. The chances of successfully awakening of God Almighty in the Creator were extremely high. Even if the Creator's plan was successful in the end and they did not betray him, there is still a significant risk and possibility. However, God Almighty indirectly influenced the fall of the ancient sun god. Was this all part of Almighty's grand plan? Was his fate then too controlled in the past? Is his meeting with the Creator also arranged? The questions that arose in his heart nearly caused an existential crisis and made him to question everything. He is not being overly dramatic. But pillars are truly that terrifying. God Almighty is also on par with the Lord of Mysteries. Given the terrifying plans left behind by the Lord of Mysteries, he did not believe that God Almighty had left nothing. Let's deal with things as they come. As he pressed his worries and anxiety, Akasis finally thought. Other than that, there was nothing else he could do. After all, he was now too weak in comparison to them, so all he focused on now was getting stronger. Oh, Akasis' heart was filled with bitterness as he remembered the Creator taking him before the barrier and making him see into the cosmos. It's ironic that, despite everything I did to get rid of my weakness, nothing seemed to have changed in the end. Did you lose? Ammoniz's voice drew him out of his reverie. His bitterness was washed away as he focused on her and the situation on the hand, returning to his calm self. Yes, Akasis nodded, while Ammoniz's eyes became deep and thoughtful. The book fell into his hands. Akasis said, turning to face her, while putting the uniqueness of the Black Emperor aside. Adam is one step closer to godhood. He said it to Amonines on purpose. So, the book is the sequence one characteristic. Ammonizes muttered and continued in a soothing tone. However, considering everything, your loss was justified. I was also taken aback when I saw the ankle-welt rising to the sky. Don't you think Visionary authority is rigged? Akasis said with a wry smile. Authority of Visionary has an advantage. Ammonizes nodded, but she continued. However, it gives the impression that it is rigged, and terrifying, to many, only because of Adam. After all, not everyone has a cathedral built from the bones and corpses of gods. Do you think there will be Phlegre's bones in that cathedral? Akasis asked, as he looked at Ammoniz's hairy arms. Ads by PubFuture. Ammonizes fell silent for a moment, and she did not return to divine form from mythical creature form, even under Akas's gaze. It doesn't matter if he has that wolf's corpse. She said this as she floated in front of him, her lips curved into a smile visible through her gauze. After all, he is not my adversary, unlike for you. She paused, as if she was contemplating something, and then she finally spoke. Akasis, tread carefully. He is not as simple as he appears. Akas's smile faded and he looked at her solemnly. He inquired, why are you telling me this, Ammonizes? I don't think of you as someone who could be kind and generous for no reason. Especially to me, who has stood against you many times in the past. Ammonizes said, the future is bleak, Akasis. With her finger, she pointed to the cosmos. In comparison to the dangers that we will face, the minor differences between us are insignificant. Oh, Akasis asked, is that a proposal for an alliance? No, Ammonizes said ethereally. Think of it as insurance for a better future. Acaces just gazed at Ammonizes, not asking any further questions into this. Come on. Then, he said, there is still another war of gods going on in the Sea of Ruins. It's best if we go there. Suddenly, Acaces paused and raised his gaze to the astral world. He grumbled, Bethel has a lot of guts to keep going against us. Forget about Bethel. Ammonizes dismissed him, as she gazed at the astral world. Are you going to put a stop to Cheek's ascension? No, Acaces stated flatly. Do you? Ammonizes remained silent, which indicated her position. Well, Acaces said with a smile. Her ascension will, at the very least, end the war of gods and usher in the new era with beautiful fireworks. Ads by PubFuture. Fireworks. Ammonizes said in a strange tone, looking at him. At the very least, Acaces, try to be serious. Her ascension will bring disaster second only to cataclysm. Acaces shrugged. We're not leaving anyway. Others who are fighting will stop as soon as they sense this and will immediately support at that time. So, there will be no problems. Ammonizes and Acaces didn't speak further, as they noticed the start of the apotheosis ritual in the astral world. The astral world. Cheek, the king of angels of Demoness Pathway, stood in front of vast cracks in reality caused by the war of gods. She knew it was time. Her dream is almost a reality. She endured all the agony and pain for this dream. Finally, she was here. For a brief moment, it seemed surreal that she had made it despite everything. Cheek, are you sure? Bethel inquired, standing not far away. Acaces and Ammonizes are already focusing here. It doesn't make a difference. Cheek smiled. Her smile was enough to enchant everyone, regardless of gender. There is no better chance than this, Bethel. I'm almost there. I'm not backing down at the last minute. Bethel, I owe you one. She carried on. For doing this, she was only able to arrive in the astral world and even close to the remains of the battle of the gods due to the assistance of Bethel, while he, by doing so, contradicted the six gods once more. It's nothing. Bethel shook his head. To be honest, I always expected you to be the first of the three of us to become a god, given your reckless and decisive nature. You're also not far from godhood, Cheek stated as she turned to face him. If you ever decide to advance in the war, I will be on your side. She made a promise. War, how come you say that? Bethel inquired, somewhat skeptically. I have a feeling the six gods will not be happy, especially. Cheek paused, pointing to the colossal golden sun at the center of the solar system. So, if you choose to ascend, I'll be on your side. As he gazed at the golden sun, Bethel remained silent. Finally, he said, let's leave that for later. There isn't much time left, so best of luck, Cheek. His figure dissolved into blue starry dust. Cheek looked at the starry dust in silence for a moment, before looking forward. She started walking towards the cracks in the very fabric of reality. Chapter 63, Primordial Demoness. Cheek walked ahead, in a space with no gravity. It didn't appear to bother her, as if she were exempt from all the material laws. She looked at the vast cracks, that were slowly closing in the fabric of reality. She knew the cracks would soon heal, as reality repaired itself, even if they weren't that obvious yet. Her heart was racing, and she was filled with anxiety, stress, and even fear. When talking about the gods, she appeared fearless in front of Bethel. But, truth be told, she was terrified of them, since she had no idea how they felt about her. There was also so many variables ahead of her that could easily kill her, but she still walked forward without hesitation. As there was no better time for her promotion than now. Her path represents disaster and end, while some gods will not want her to ascend in the first place. That's why she chose now, during the War of Gods, when the gods don't have much time to focus on her. She can, however, feel the gaze of the eternal blazing sun and Evernight goddess on her. Despite this though, she did not stop. This was her dream. She can finally control her own destiny. She didn't have to constantly hide and be afraid of losing her life. She remembers the cataclysm. The massive golden sun in the sky turned orange, and the entire earth was illuminated by twilight. The twilight didn't last long though, as a storm of thunder and a wave of degenerative darkness quickly followed. She lost everything in that calamity. She was also not among the fortunate few who received the protection of gods and the King of Angels. Despite her desperate pleas for help, no one accepted her. She still survived, losing everything, and leaving her heart scarred for life. In this darkest hour of her life, she saw the world for what it truly was. Then, She realized the significance of power. Her desire to become a god was thus become to be. To be honest, all she ever wanted was to survive in the end. Ads by PubFuture. Cheek finally stopped. She wore a long white gown with black stripes. She had a necklace with a black diamond inlaid around her neck. Her hair was long and straight, reaching her hips. Her facial features were breathtakingly beautiful, enough to lure anyone, regardless of gender, and drag them into the depths of depravity. She was surrounded by cracks in reality, like a cracked mirror. This was caused by the battle between Eternal Blazing Sun, Evernight Goddess, and Black Emperor. In silence, Cheek gazed at the solar system, passing the Sun in the center, then Mercury, Venus, and finally stopping on Earth. Meanwhile, her mind wandered to the apotheosis ritual of Primordial Demoness, Chaos Demoness. Ritual. Cause reality to collapse, bringing everything to an end, chaos before creation. Then, drink the potion for advancement in the midst of the chaos. It is quite difficult for anyone below gods, with the exception of Medici, Bethel and Adam, to actually destroy reality. Even Cheek, who wields the power of calamity, can only cause reality to crack, which saps all of her power. She has a long way to go before she can bring reality tumbling down around her. However, if she had previously accommodated the uniqueness of Demoness pathway, she should have been able to. But, it has been difficult to accommodate one's uniqueness before becoming a god, since the fall of the Creator. Finally, she eventually arrived here in the ruins left by the Battle of Gods. This entire reality here is weakened and cracked. This was an excellent opportunity for her to assert her authority and bring down the weakened reality as a whole. The conditions are ideal for her. Situations like this are unlikely to occur again. This was why, despite the dangers, she was determined to go on, N-O-V-E in .C Om. It's time, she murmured, as a cataclysmic aura erupted from her and swept around her. Crack, 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 the healing cracks in the fabric of reality came to a halt. Then, all of it began to deepen and expand outwards into the astral world. Ads by PubFuture. Boom. It all came crashing down in the next moment and everything collapsed into chaos around her as the center. Cheek stood in the midst of the raging chaos, her body visibly disintegrating as well. She ignored this, raising her trembling hands, which were collapsing into chaos, and twisting them with struggle. A blob of gray liquid formed in front of her, unaffected by the chaos. She willed it towards her with the last of her strength. The gray liquid swooped down on her. The liquid began to wrap itself around her, extending and changing like a translucent skin. Then, Cheek's figure collapsed into chaos, taking the shape of snakes. She began assimilating with chaos before creation, becoming one with it. This was the most dangerous part of the ritual, as one could become lost forever in the chaos. If Cheek is to succeed, she must not be consumed by the chaos. And, she finally needs to rebuild her body within the chaos in order to ascend to become the Chaos Demoness. The snake-like figures that were dissipating in the midst of the raging chaos, shone brightly with gray light. They materialized and began to congregate in the center. On Earth, the 6 gods stood in a circle around the entire planet, looking solemnly at the chaos before them. The chaos was spreading at an incredible rate, covering the majority of the outer space between Mercury and Earth. It won't be long before it collides with the Earth. Nonetheless, the 6 gods still did nothing. The expanding chaos came to a halt after a few moments, as footsteps echoed through the astral world. Cheek emerged from the chaos, her eyes pitch black and her hair bloated, each strand of her hair transformed into slithering snakes. The outer layer was slick and sinister, with clear black and white eyes embedded at the tips. They flicked their tongues with their mouths slightly open. The primordial demoness was born. She suddenly laughed, her laughter piercing, making all who heard her feel her intense emotions as well. Immediately, an aura of end erupted, blanketing the entire astral world within the barrier. Ads by PubFuture. Calamity erupted, ranging from a seemingly minor mishap to a world-ending catastrophe, manifested in reality. Every continent experienced earthquakes, and many people suddenly dropped dead as a result of diseases, accidents, and misfortune. Tidal waves raged above the 5 seas, almost reaching the sky, while being capable of destroying continents itself. The blue sky changed as a cluster of blazing meteorites appeared and plummeted into the world, many of which had the power to destroy the entire planet. The raging chaos that had paused in the astral world began to surge towards Earth, like a beast seeking to devour the entire planet. Image here, Umbella, exclaimed Akasis. The Justiciar Unatunus. Lilith immediately raised her hand, as a brass book appeared. Then, she threw it towards Akas's. Everyone. Akas's eyes shone purple, sending information about his plan to all the gods. Even if the gods work together to stop this, the earth will still undoubtedly suffer as a result. But, he has a plan that will put an end to it all in a timely manner. The gods nodded, even Leodoro and Heribergan agreed. They then raised their hands in unison. Above Akas's, the symbol of 5 gods appeared. The symbols glowed with light, illuminating his figure. The authorities of the 5 gods only shallowly supported Akas's. It could at most be regarded as a blessing. It didn't combine with him like it did with Trunsoest. After all, he is God, and doing so will not end well for him. Akas's eyes turned brass as a balance scale appeared in his hand. His calm gaze was fixed on the raging chaos. He declared, as his majestic voice reverberated in the astral world. I will have order. The brass book emitted a shimmering light, illuminating the astral world within the barrier. The light erased the concept of end, brought into reality by ascension of Cheek. The terrifying chaos vanished, as did the disasters. With it, order was restored to reality. The light converged, revealing Cheek, who was still smiling, her eyes reminiscent of the past. Her dream has come true. In chaos, she was finally reborn. Chapter 64, Death Toll. The next day, Tenebrous Heaven, Amantha Mountains. The 6 gods were present at a long black table, and on the table was uniqueness of the Black Emperor and Justiciar, as well as 3 characteristics of Prince of Abolition. Trunsoest, Alista, and Diana stood in front of the table, staring at the 6 gods and items on the table. Trunsoest and Alista were summoned by the 6 gods, while Diana, the only archangel called up by the 6 gods, to represent the angels of the 6 gods as a whole. Your Excellencies, here are all the characteristics that we acquired during the war. Diana stated with a frail tone in her voice. However, she still took the characteristics from the blue bag she was carrying and placed them on the table. The characteristics of a miracle invoker, Trojan horse of destiny, 2 weather warlocks, 1 balancer, and 1 soothsayer were placed on the table. The majority of it was obtained by slaying angels of noble families, while the soothsayer was an angel under Ouroboros. Diana finally took the last characteristic and placed it. Unlike others, she specifically mentioned it. Hand of Order, Your Excellencies, it's a sequence 1 characteristic. Trunsoest gave it to us. It was previously in the possession of the Black Emperor. She looked at Trunsoest, who stood beside her. Ads by PubFuture. Trunsoest nodded in acknowledgement, as he felt her gaze. However, whether Diana, Trunsoest, and Alista, they were overcome with emotion in their hearts, as they gazed at everything on the table. After all, it was a sight to behold that 2 uniqueness, as well as 4 sequence 1 characteristics and many sequence 2 characteristics, were all on the same table. Despite this, they saw that the gods were completely indifferent. How are our losses? Leodoro spoke up after a quick glance at the characteristics, pausing only on Miracle Invoker. Your Excellency, we lost 1/3 of our angels in the war. Diana looked at the Lord of Storms and said calmly, we have retrieved all of the characteristics and they are being returned to the respective churches. Leodoro remained calm. After all, it was war, and there would be casualties. However, he noticed that Akas's had not suffered much loss. All of his angels are still alive and well. He knew this wasn't just happenstance. He can now see the meticulous planning and arrangements made by Akas's to ensure that. He couldn't decide whether to laugh at Akas's for caring so much about angels despite being a god, or to be cautious and wary of Akas's. One thing he is certain of is that Akas's has changed significantly, so much so that he felt him a greater threat from him than Heribergan. This gave him a sense of crisis, like never before. Leodoro decided that rather than giving Akas's enough time to plan, he would seize an opportunity, as soon as it appeared and perform a fatal strike on Akas's. He also knows that such an opportunity will take a long time to come, because the contract of Akas's forbade any battle between the 6 gods. So, as long as the alliance exists, there will be no war between the 6 gods. Ads by PubFuture. Other gods in the black table were also calm, with their own thoughts while looking at the sequence 2 characteristics on the table. You are free to leave, Diana. Akas's said. However, he saw hesitation on her face, knowing that there is still a lot of inform and also receive orders from them. Go gather all the angels and saints of the 6 churches. You will receive information from Trunsoest and Alitza, as well as the orders through them. After finishing, he looked around at the other gods to see if anyone objected. Seeing no one, he finally nodded to her. Diana bowed one last time before exiting the room. Boom. No vel b in c om. With her departure, the doors closed, and the 6 gods finally focused on the 2 traitors standing before them. Alitza and Trunsoest were both trying their hardest to maintain their composure in the face of the gods' piercing gaze. They felt as if everything about them was being scrutinized and analyzed, which honestly, they didn't like at all. How much is the death toll, Alista? Akasas finally broke the silence, as he looked at Alitza Tutor. Alista Tutor, when Akasas looked at the Angel of Solomon, he saw such a thirst for power that reminded him of himself. Alista tried his best to conceal it while looking at the uniqueness and characteristics of the Black Emperor. However, in front of the gods, the mask he attempted to wear was useless. But, despite the fact that Alista's thirst for power is similar to his own, that was the end of it. There was no other resemblance or similarity. Though he saw a madness hidden in the depths of Alitza, the type who would do and disregard anything to achieve his own goals. Alista looked surprised, as if he didn't expect the gods to question him first. Nonetheless, he responded immediately after reviewing the report that they were able to collect. It's around 19 million, Your Excellency. Despite saying such a heavy number, Alitza's voice remained calm and composed. That's a lot more than we expected. Lilith said this while rubbing her temples and digesting the astronomical numbers. Unlike the other gods, she was still somewhat concerned about lives of mortals. We actually lost 1/5 of the northern continent's population during this war. The other gods were indifferent. This was not because divinity affected them. They were immortals who had witnessed the fall of an entire civilization, and their feelings for mortals had long since faded. Your Excellency, the total loss of life in the war is only 10 million. Alista continued, his tone and expression becoming solemn and grave, after noticing the concern of the Earth Mother. The remaining 9 million were the result of the ascension of primordial demoness and the fall of the Black Emperor. A large number of people died suddenly as a result of fatal diseases that contaminated and instantly killed them. There were also minor accidents that resulted in many deaths. According to another report, people who had no prior health or mental problems appeared to die suddenly, without a clear cause. There have been numerous incidents like this. The situation becomes even more bizarre when some committed mass murders before taking their own lives. A large number of Beyonders went out of control, turning them into mindless monsters with only the desire to destroy and kill. We're still not sure if this has anything to do with primordial demoness. And the Solomon Empire's capital, with nearly population of 1 million, was destroyed as a result of the Black Emperor's remains falling onto the city. Finally, we have a definitive report that the majority of the 9 million deaths were primarily due to diseases. Trunsoest, who was listening, stayed quiet. His hands were clenched, and his eyes were filled with anguish. While Akasas, who heard such figures, remained indifferent. But his thoughts wandered to his anchors. His anchors are still fine, even though they were harmed, the damage was not severe. As the Solomon Empire bore the brunt of the casualties in the war. You don't have to be concerned, Ombella. After fully hearing the report, Harabergen spoke up. With time, the population will recover. This was all he had to say to comfort her. It was the truth, even if it appeared cruel. Lilith remained silent and looked at the other gods. She finally sighed and reclined in her seat. All right, let's move on to the next issue. Akasas spoke while his gaze was drawn to Trunsoest. The Angel Families. Chapter 65, The Continent. Trunsoest looked up, taking a deep breath to calm down. With trembling hands, he began speaking. It's all right, Trunsoest. Amonizes interarbuted, soothingly. You did nothing wrong. There has never been war without bloodshed. And, imagine the era that is about to arrive. Trunsoest's restless heart became tranquil as Evernight Goddess' voice echoed in his mind, reminding him of the future. Finally, he stared at the eternal blazing sun and began recounting events concerning the angel families. As soon as the war began, most of the angel families betrayed the emperor. But there was still resistance from the Augustus family, the Tamara family, the Zoroast family, the Zeratul family, and the Sauron family. He paused and looked up to see if the gods had anything to say. He witnessed eternal blazing sun acknowledged him with a nod and motioned him to continue. However, with the emperor's demise, except for the Zoroast and Zeratul families, all of the families have surrendered. Despite their conditions, both of those families publicly declared their allegiance as still with the Black Emperor. We are powerless to intervene because 2 archangels are present in the families, and we are still recovering. He finished by looking at the gods, waiting for their verdict on these 2 families. I didn't expect to find idiots like those 2 among archangels. Leodoro scowled. So, what are we going to do with them? Their confidence in standing us against all of us, however, is skeptical, Bodil said. I believe Solomon must have left something behind with them. He made an educated guess. The Zaratul and Zoroast families should be eliminated. Akasis proposed indifferently. I agree. Ammonizes gave a nod, but, Akasis, saying is one thing, doing is quite another. Harribergen shot back. Our forces are no longer sufficient to completely eliminate them. Indeed, Akasis acknowledged. However, our angels will have enough advantage in the future to lead a crusade against the 2 families. Harribergen remained silent at that, as did the other gods, expressing their stance at this. Ads by PubFuture. Trunsoest, don't confront them head-on and just suppress them through all means, including completely cutting off their territories from the rest of the world. Akasis gave an order to Trunsoest, then turned to face Lilith. If you could, Ombella, curse their lands to remain barren forever. This would ruin their families. Lilith nodded as she heard this. While, Trunsoest was paying close attention to his words. Meanwhile, Alista's thoughts wandered from the moment he heard the god of combat mention Emperor. Let's move on to the next issue, Akasis said, as he waved his hands. A flash of light erupted slightly above the table, morphing into a projection of the northern continent. The northern continent displayed the Solomon Empire and the kingdoms of 6 gods. The 6 kingdoms will join the newly formed empire, Akasis declared, as the projection changed. There were no more 6 kingdoms or the Solomon Empire, only one newly formed empire that covered the entire northern continent. The empire will only follow the faith of the 6 gods. His words resounded in tenebrous heaven, as an invisible fluctuation appeared on the reality, breaking through restraints of the divine kingdom and sweeping the reality of the northern continent. Across the northern continent, a order was established. Alitza and Trunsoest shook, their eyes filled with horror and terror. The angels of the Black Emperor pathway have a far superior sense and understanding of rules than others. This was why they were terrified, because the very rules and laws of reality changed with just the words of the eternal blazing sun. Even their emperor couldn't do something like that before. Alitza and Trunsoest, who are so different from one another, but they now share same fear, eternal blazing sun. Now, let us decide which city will serve as the capital. Akasis said, looking at the gods, who didn't react like those 2. Still, Harribergen's eyes flashed with surprise, and Leodoro was gloomy. Then, he waved his hands, and 4 dots of light appeared on the projection, with names appearing below them. Backland, Fainapotter, Street, Milan, and Trier. Those are the options available to us. These 4 cities are the most developed on the northern continent, Akasis said. While, he pointed to Backland, it is now the most populated city on northern continent, as the Solomon Empire's capital has been destroyed. Ads by PubFuture. Let's go with Backland. Ammonizes responded immediately. Trier is better. Bodil made a suggestion. The other gods remained silent, but their gazes were drawn to Backland and Trier. Akasis deliberated on a common ground. Let's vote. Backland. He, Ammonizes, Leodoro, and Harribergen all voted in favor by raising their hands. That's it. Backland shall be the capital. He declared, once more. Bodil, on the other hand, did not back down and proposed a new idea. How about we divide the empire into 4 provinces? Backland shall be the capital of both the empire and an province, while the other 3 cities shall be the capitals of the other 3 provinces. Brilliant idea, Bodil. As he took another look at the giant, Harribergen was genuinely surprised. Hearing this, Akasis nodded before turning to face the other gods, who remained silent in agreement. Turnoist, you will be in charge of drawing the borders of provinces. He assigned, while Trunsoest was jolted out of his trance by the sight of gods shaping the continent to their liking right in front of him, and nodded solemnly. Finally, Akasis waved his hands as the projection of the northern continent vanished and the empire's layout was finalized. There is still an important issue, Akasis, Ammonizes said ethereally as she looked at Alitza and Trunsoest. Who will rule the empire? She asked the most important question. Ads by PubFuture. The meeting room fell silent and the gods all looked at the Trunsoest and Alitza. Here it is. Alista sighed nervously as the moment he had been anticipating arrived. Trunsoest remained unusually calm in the face of the gods' scrutiny. He had no idea if they would pick him. But he will wholeheartedly accept the decision of the 6 gods, even if it is against him. Double Consul. As his starry eyes twinkled, Harribergen proposed. Let them both rule the empire, with the ability to veto each other's decisions. This will serve as a check and balance between them. As expected of him, Aukasas observed Harribergen, with his brows raised. This type of government may work in the normal world, but it will not last long in the extraordinary world. It was doomed to fail in the future. Harribergen should have guessed about the Black Emperor and even pried into fate, knowing that the fate of this empire is already sealed. He was simply hastening the collapse of the empire. As the empire crumbles, so will the alliance of 6 gods. Aukasas can be certain that Harribergen should have already begun planning for the upcoming war of 4 emperors. Let's put it up for a vote. Aukasas spoke up, before anyone else could say on this. He intended to end this quickly. For Double Consul, he, Ammonizes, Harribergen, and Lilith all voted in favor. Then it's settled, he said. While Alitz's disappointment was palpable, Trunsoest was also surprised by the gods' decision. Aukasas raised his hands and took 2 sequence 1 characteristics from the table. Then, he hurled it at them. As rulers of the empire, one should have at least enough power to match and suppress their subjects in order to maintain the order and stability. While they both looked at him, he said, "So, promote to archangels soon. This is also a payment from us." Alista looked the characteristics of the Prince of Abolition. At the very least, this alleviated his disappointment, and the prospect of getting closer to godhood almost made him leap with joy. He stifled his excitement and looked for Trunsoest's characteristic. His eyes were filled with relief. Trunsoest's characteristic was Hand of Order, Sequence 1, Justiciar Pathway. Aukasas smirked slightly, as he noticed Alista's relief. Finally, he said, "The only issue left with the Empire is naming it. Let's name it, the Tudor Trunsoest United Empire." Chapter 66. The Uniqueness and Characterizes. Amantha Mountains, Tenebrous Heaven. The 6 gods finally looked at the characteristics on the long black table. Tudor and Trunsoest had already left after their receiving orders. The Sequence 2 characteristics, let's take one each, in order of who contributed the most to the war, Aukasas said, breaking the silence. Then, he took the characteristic of the Trojan Horse of Destiny, Sequence 2 of the Error Pathway. He really doesn't need anything else besides this. It would be difficult to raise an angel from scratch. However, there is demigod from Error Pathway in his church. Aukasas doesn't mind bestowing this characteristic to that demigod, if she could prove herself to be worthy and capable. The Church of Gods is not monolithic about the pathways, as in the future. Each church contains beyonders from various paths. All 6 gods have seen the blasphemy slate. Their understanding of potion formulas extends to all 22 pathways. If they want to, they can easily grant formulas for other pathways. The other gods said nothing when they saw him take first place. After all, Aukasas was the one who made the whole thing possible. Ammonizes then chose the Soothsayer, Sequence 2 of the Wheel of Fortune pathway. Then, the other 4 took the one they wanted, and they were, No, Vel, B, Jn.C, Ohm. Lilith selected the Balancer, Sequence 2 of Justiciar pathway. Leodoro chose the Sequence 2 Miracle Invoker of the Fool pathway. While Harribergen and Bodial held the characteristics of Sequence 2, Weather Warlock of Red Priest pathway. That's the end of that, Aukasas stated. Then he pushed the uniqueness of the Black Emperor and Justiciar to the front. The Black Emperor. Solomon could resurrect again. Even though I erased Solomon's twisted order, and completely destroyed his empire, the 9 mausoleums remain. I've already found 2 of those. Leodoro interpreted solemnly. We must eliminate them as soon as possible. The longer we wait, the more likely it is that Solomon will be successfully resurrected. As Bodial said before, Lilith spoke up as she looked at Bodial. Those 2 families could be related to the mausoleums, and they could even be protecting it. Adds by PubFuture. That's a certainty, Aukasas nodded. They hadn't discussed it before because of the presence of the Trunsoest and Tudor. I believe Solomon left some arrangements. He should have known that if he died, we would search and destroy his mausoleums, Bodial speculated. Are you able to see the 9 mausoleums, Harribergen? After hearing all of this, Ammonizes inquired of Harribergen. If anyone can spot an anomaly in this, Harribergen should be the first to do so. Harribergen remained silent for a moment, his starry eyes twinkling. The other gods stayed quiet and waited. No, as his starry eyes dimmed, he said vaguely. I could find most of them, but there was only chaos blocking my path to rest. Solomon really planned well and thoroughly to actually able to block my sight. After that, there was a slight heaviness in the air. I'm taking on this, Akasis said abruptly, causing everyone to look at him. When it comes to dealing with chaos, there shouldn't be anyone better than me. I will destroy the mausoleums myself. He volunteered. I believe Harabergen is a better fit than you, Akasis. Leodoro retorted, knowing what Akasis was up to. The bastard must be planning to gain the uniqueness of Black Emperor, and him volunteering should only be a cover. He will never allow that. Even though he disliked Harabergen, he suggested the dragon because he was the only one, aside from Akasis, who could find the mausoleums faster than others. The Black Emperor's uniqueness may provide some hints as to the location of the hidden mausoleum. Akasis holds authority of order. He can increase his power through this, even if he doesn't have much control over it, as he does with Hermit, but simply using it in battle will allow his power to increase exponentially. In comparison to Akasis, Harabergen will not benefit as much from obtaining the Black Emperor uniqueness. This is why, despite his dislike for both of them, Leodoro suggested Harabergen. Looking at Leodoro and Harabergen, Akasis seemed surprised. How did you feel about it, Harabergen? Harabergen didn't respond, instead staring deeply at Akasis for a few moments. Then, he unexpectedly proposed. Let's put it to a vote. If the vote is tied, Bethel will be included in the next round of voting. Leodoro predicted a tie vote because he and Ammonizes will both vote for Harabergen, while Bodil and Ombella are already leaning towards Akasis. He also has no idea which side Bethel would take. Okay, Akasis smiled as he nodded and looked around. All for me. Bodil and Lilith both raised their hands in favor. After seeing the tie, Leodoro pondered on what to do with Bethel. But, his eyes widened in surprise soon. Ads by PubFuture. Ammonizes raised her hand in favor of Akasis. Harabergen, on the other hand, was calm, as if he had anticipated this. That's the end of it, Leodoro. Akasis' smile widened, as he looked at Leodoro. He also did not appear surprised that Ammonizes voted for him. Then, he raised his hand and took the uniqueness and threw it into his kingdom. It took a lot for Leodoro to regain his composure and refrain from hurling a bolt of lightning at the Akasis' narcissistic smile. Then, he also looked at Ammonizes, perplexed as to why she would support Akasis. He was completely taken aback by her. Ombella will be given the Justiciar uniqueness. After carefully considering, Akasis prospered. Nobody objected, and Lilith took the Justiciar, but Akasis is certain, he saw her bright smile as she took it. While, Leodoro continued to glare at Ammonizes. Ammonizes didn't bother to explain herself, instead giving a name to change the subject. Aemon, how are we going to deal with him? His avatars remain within the Empire, and his true body has also entered. Allow him to join the Empire. Akasis said calmly. We cannot control him with order. Harabergen retorted. He will find loopholes to exploit in order to gain an advantage, and he may even turn the tables on us. More importantly, he will wreak havoc on the Empire. So, Akasis, think twice before suggesting something like this. You're playing with fire. Aemon will enter the Empire in one way or another, Akasis said with certainty. Even though his presence can be detrimental, it will be compensated for when he moves against high-sequence beyonders of mysterious pathways that are not aligned with us. Is it really necessary to go that far to suppress the pathways of mysteries? Lilith inquired, after hearing that. The door, fool, and error pathways were always suppressed in the third epoch. The low-sequence formulas for these pathways were not widely known. This was due to the order of the ancient sun god. When the creator fell, this was removed, and angel families for these pathways began to form. Nonetheless, many gods still forbade the formulas from spreading outside of their church in order to reduce the number of beyonders of these three pathways. Yes, Akasis nodded. The pathways should be suppressed. There is still a significant risk of losing control in high sequence. And, not everyone is Aemon and Bethel, who can remain sane and stable in the face of adversity. Is Aemon permitted to join the Empire or not? Ammonizes inquired ethereally, returning the conversation to Aemon. How about we vote? Akasis suggested, all in Amon's favor. Ads by PubFuture. He, Ammonizes, Lilith, and Bodil all voted yes. Even though Leodoro and Harabergen didn't like Aemon, it didn't bother them all that much to accept him into the Empire, after considering everything. That settles it, Akasis said. I'll send Diana to meet with Aemon and inform him of our decision. Next, Cheek and Artisan. He moved on to the next issue. Cheek has a secret organization within the Empire. She is still stabilizing herself after the ascension. She has not caused any major disaster since her ascension. In light of this, I propose letting her be as long as she and her organization do not cross the line. However, her organization will be regarded as unorthodox. What are your thoughts? This is fine, Ammonizes commented ethereally, while the other gods remained silent in agreement. Akasas nodded and continued, moving on, Artisan requested our permission to implement his inventions throughout the Empire. Let it be implemented, Harabergen agreed. Artisan's steam engine will revolutionize the Empire in many ways. Long term, this will also exponentially increase population growth. We can expect a new god to join us soon, a powerful god at that, if this is successful. Lilith said. Indeed, it won't be long before he ascends. Akasas added, he knew this would allow Artisan to properly digest his potion and ascend to godhood. He will not face any problems, as Hidden Sage was killed by Lilith. What is his divine name? Leodoro inquired, his curiosity piqued by the prospect of another god ascending. God of Steam and Machinery. Ammonizes replied, then she looked at Akasas. He's already started preaching, Akasas. While, Order, only considered faith on 6 of us to be orthodox. I'll change it after he attains godhood. Akasas responded. Then, Artisan's petition is approved. He then declared. He finally stood up and finished. That's all for this Wait, Lilith interjected, capturing everyone's attention. Alitza and Trunsoest's coronation. It will happen in a month, Umbella. The angels and saints are already preparing for it, Akasas said. I know. Lilith looked at Akasas and inquired. But who will crown them while representing us? The gods, who had all stood up and were about to leave, stopped and thought. Artisan. Akasas decided. Artisan will crown Trunsoest. Tutor, on the other hand. He paused. Only Bethel, Ammon, and Adam are the remaining kings of angels in the Empire. For various reasons, he did not bother to consider them. Bethel, Ammonizes said ethereally. Let him to crown Tutor. There isn't a better person other than him. All right, Bethel and Artisan. Akasas asked, even though he didn't want Bethel, but he didn't express his opinion to them. The gods were silent in agreement. Finally, the coronation will be broadcasted live across the continent. I will personally use my authority to do that, Akasas said. If any of you wanted to help, you can come to my kingdom. Well, Akasas concluded with a smile. That ends the meeting. Chapter 67, Era of Steam. Northern Continent. A month had passed. Historians went on consider the harsh times that followed the war and plague to be among the darkest in history. This calamity is remembered as the second most devastation disaster in recorded history, trailing only the cataclysm and preceding the Blood Night. As the saying goes, disaster brings with it the change. Even though the repercussions were severe, it also provided an opportunity for humanity's most prosperous era to emerge since the fall of modern civilization. Future historians will extol this era as the beginning of the Great Change. This era was given numerous names, but it was widely known and accepted by all as the Era of Steam. The light of dawn shone through the clouds, illuminating the northern continent. A clear spectacle can be seen in the blue sky. As the clouds parted, it revealed a slew of airships gliding through the sky. Image. The airship's design was heavily steampunk, with the burning engines at the top of the passenger cabin being powered by steam, and the cabin being elegant and grand, made of gleaming and polished wood, with the front of the cabin inlaid with glass, providing passengers with an observation area. Image. Akasas was present at a restaurant table in one of those airships. There was a dozen of newspapers in front of him, each with a different headline. NOVELBJN.C Ohm. The headlines read, The Miracle of Steam, Man Conquers the Sky. It showed a picture of the airship being launched from the station right below, and there was a large emblem at the station's entrance. The emblems represented by a solid triangle which were filled with symbols such as steam, gears, and levers. It was the sacred emblem of the god of steam and machinery. Underneath these headlines, there was news of steam engine revolutionizing the stagnant industrial sector, as well as a sharp increase in the number of available jobs, which was attributed to the revolution. On the same newspaper, there were also images and information about the various inventions introduced in the previous month. Steam ships, steam trains, and many other inventions were among them. Everything on the front page was about the miracles and magnificence of steam. Your order is here, sir. A waitress placed a silver cup in front of Akasas. A firma coffee. Akasis nodded and handed the waitress a gold coin with the sun emblem as a tip. When the waitress saw the tip, she became brisk. Then, she bowed and left with a smile. Akasis drank the coffee from his cup while turning to look to the side. His table was located on the side of the glass windows, which replaced the walls and provided a clear view of the gliding clouds and rising sun. One could also look down to see the construction of the railway tracks and vast mountains in front of them. It was a picturesque view that could completely immerse oneself in it, while forgetting about time. Akasis waved his hands, and the bright sun on the horizon dimmed slightly, making the view before him even more beautiful and mesmerizing. Perfect, he thought contentedly, he can finally rest and travel around, witnessing the dawn of a new era. Even though he knew that there were still mountains of issues that required his attention, and his angels were still bombarding his ears with prayers to check about the coronation. But, right now, he didn't care about anything except reading the newspapers and drinking coffee while taking in the scenery. The sunlight illuminated his figure. He was dressed in a vintage black suit and trousers. Honestly, despite being the god of light, he still prefers dark-colored clothing because it matches well his white hair. His hair though remained unkempt, and his irises were golden. While he was sitting in a restaurant inside the airship, which had been flying for 2 days. The restaurant was packed with people, not just ordinary people, but also beyonders, mostly low and mid-sequence. The airship was one of the first to enter service, traveling from Trier to Backland, and the route was finalized and monitored by both the Church of Steam and the Church of Storms. Ads by PubFuture. Akasis finally put down the coffee, which had been reduced to half, and sighed as he looked at the newspapers on the table. Steam. He looked at the eye-catching headline on one of the newspapers. The future has changed completely now. He thought as he rubbed his temples, closed his eyes, and tried to divine the future. After a few moments, he opened his eyes and gazed out the window at the steampunk-styled airships. His eyes were filled with emotion, and his heart was surreal. Even if he is God, it was too shocking to see how a small change caused by him changed the entire course of human civilization. Holy crap, Akasis thought with joy, as the initial surprise wore off. It's going to be steampunk. I can't believe I'm going to witness that in the future. Yes, steampunk. The civilization is now developing in that manner due to the manipulation of artisan. And, Akasis can already guess what factors caused such a significant shift. Russell introduced the steam engine in the original timeline, sparking the first industrial revolution. Even so, civilization's progress stalled after that. Yet, even with the steam engine, such inventions as airships did not exist in the original timeline. What has caused such a shift now? Akasis knew, it was all because of artisan. Russell was simply plagiarizing from modern civilization in the start. Despite the fact that the Paragon pathway in the higher sequence would grant him innovative abilities, Russell is nowhere near artisan, who actually managed to build a floating continent in this era. In the original timeline, artisan promoted without digesting his sequence-1 potion, which had serious consequences, including the loss of most of one's humanity and the constant risk being on the verge of losing control. As a result, artisan should have spent almost all of his time struggling to maintain his sanity, with little to no time to devote to the advancement of civilization, which is critical for the god of the Paragon pathway. He should have improved as a result of the revolution brought about by Russell, but it is undeniable that his reckless promotion affected him for the rest of his life, given the civilization's stagnation following Russell's fall. However, artisan will not face any of these issues right now. Ads by PubFuture. He has begun fully implementing his ideas for the Empire in preparation for his apotheosis ritual. Why? Akasis reasoned, would it be steampunk? It's simple. There's no crude oil to kickstart a second industrial revolution, but this won't stop artisan, whose innovative talent was unrivaled. Well, that was something I didn't expect. Akasis reflected, as this realization had only come to him during this month. To be honest, despite this change that may affect everything, he still can't wait to see the future with his own eyes. His gaze was finally drawn to the tile that read, "Man conquered the sky." Well, Leodoro won't be happy if he sees that, he thought with amusement, as he put that newspaper away and looked at another with different headlines. The coronation of Alitza Tudor and Trunsoest. His attention was drawn to the details below the title. The coronation will be broadcast live across the empire under the divine miracle of the eternal blazing sun. Today is the coronation day, and he must say that the angels planned the entire event magnificently. How magnificent! The colossal statues of the 6 of them were erected directly in front of the royal palace, where the coronation will take place. While this was just only one part of the coronation. After a brief glance, Aukasas turned the pages of the newspaper and took a sip of his coffee. He began browsing the other news while enjoying his alone time, until someone decided to ruin it. Aukasas, what a surprise! Aukasas sighed and looked up at the man standing before him, his eyes clearly irked. The man had black curly hair and black eyes. His forehead was rather broad in contrast to his thin face. He was wearing a black suit and a long overcoat. There was a golden pocket watch, which hung on the edge of the overcoat. What was most noticeable about him, however, was a crystal monocle he wore over his right eye, which glistened with light. _AN. When I wrote the previous chapter, I didn't fully consider the change that Artisan could bring about until I read a comment. So, yes, under the influence of Artisan, civilization will develop in a completely different way. But, to be honest, I was still unsure whether to proceed with this change or not, because by the 5th epic, it won't be a Victorian era like the original story. I'm not sure if you all will like it, as this is a significant change. But, after some thought, I decided to go ahead with it. If you want to share your thoughts on this, I would welcome it. Image. Finally, this is what Aukasas saw in his divination. Chapter 68, Miracle. Can I join? Eamon inquired, a smile on his face. He pointed to an empty seat at the Aukasas table. There isn't another seat in the entire restaurant except this one. Soon after, he added. Aukasas looked around the restaurant, which was packed and buzzing with whispers as well as conversations. All of the seats were occupied. He did not, however, deny him. Yes, there goes the rest of my alone time, he mused, slightly frustrated. But it vanished when he saw the outline of the magnificent city slowly emerging through the clouds. Backland has arrived. Meanwhile, Eamon sat on the chair in front of him, following his gaze to look there as well. NOVELBJN.C. I didn't expect you to come to the coronation too, Aukasas. Eamon said as he adjusted his monocle. After all, you are a god. He laughed. Aukasas averted his gaze from the windows and turned to face the Eamon, then replied flatly. I'm not going, at least not officially. He went on. But, Eamon, what are you doing here? Did I not say it? Despite hearing his annoyed tone, Eamon replied patiently. I am going to the coronation. He took the invitation from his pocket and shook it in front of the Aukasas. I was invited, even though you didn't bother to send an invitation. Alitsa Tutor, on the other hand, invited me and even made me a special guest. For a moment, Aukasas stared silently at the Tutor family emblem on the envelope. Then, he snatched the invitation from Amon's grasp and tore it open. He smiled, as he gave it a glance. The letter is an invitation, but it also implies Tutor's intention to win Eamon over to his side and support Tutor in ruling of the empire. And Eamon accepted it. You actually accepted this. With a chuckle, Aukasas said. It's really surprising, that you're now willing to work for someone far weaker than you. He also returned the invention to him. Ads by PubFuture. Eamon was unfazed by Aukasas' previous rudeness and spoke calmly. You and the other gods have a wonderful vision in selecting them to be rulers. They both have a peculiar fate. It would be interesting to be a part of their journey, particularly Alitsa. Aukasas didn't bother to inquire further. He understood exactly what Eamon meant. Eamon simply desires chaos, which is possible with Alitsa in the future. However, Aukasas will not stop this. In fact, he encourages it. After all, if his plans are to succeed, he also needs chaos in the future. So you meet with Artisan as well. Aukasas narrowed his eyes at Amon's pocket watch on his overcoat. It gave him a familiar divine aura. Eamon gave a nod. I recently met with Artisan. I witnessed many of his inventions, and he also gave me this golden watch as a gift. He notices Aukasas' keen interest with it. Artisan's inventions are truly fascinating, so I opted to experience one myself. He pointed another airship that was floating nearby. I decided to take an airship from Trier, which you can see flying nearby. But, after finding you in here, I decided to come over to this. At the very least, you finally seem to have gathered the courage to meet me with your true body. Aukasas smirked and leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee. Eamon was still calm and responded with a smile. Wasn't it you who permitted me into this empire? And, as an imperial citizen, the Order recognizes and protects me. Even though Aukasas was the one who established the Order, the other 5 gods have some sway over it, due to the contract and alliance they formed. So, if Akas's wishes to remove Aemon from the empire using the order, the majority of the gods must also agree. But that doesn't mean he can't do it himself. This was actually proposed by Akas's. Yes, it indeed reduces his influence, but other gods will not allow a single god to have such control over reality. If he hadn't proposed it, their alliance would have crumbled by now. Akas's was also not surprised that Aemon was still fearless despite nearly dying in his hands before, because while Aemon is cautious, he can also be extremely courageous. He really is a contradictory person. He knew Aemon wasn't lying about boarding the ship and meeting him unexpectedly this time. Indeed, while looking at him, Akas's said indifferently, "But never forget that you are only here because of me." Even after hearing the threat hidden in his words, Amon's smile didn't lessen. He was about to say something when he turned to look out the window, as if something caught his attention. "Your angels are amazing to be able to pull something like this off," he marveled. Akas's also looked out the window, gazing at the magnificent city visible through the clouds. Ads by PubFuture. Image. Backland. The restaurant where they were also fell silent as everyone stood up from their seats and looked out. Their eyes were filled with shock, disbelief, and piety. In Backland, 6 colossal statues stood, each towering above the clouds. The 6 gods. The statues of gods had divine halos behind their heads, and emitted a divine aura. The statues surrounded the royal place, which was small in comparison. The eternal blazing sun statue had changed. Now, the sun god held an open book with a single eye within a triangle in one hand and a balanced scale in the other. That is quite tall. Akas's estimated that it should be nearly 600 meters. This was constructed in less than a month. At this moment, one can clearly see the efficiency and power of the mysterious world. Then he took a pocket watch from his suit and checked the time. After seeing the time, he turned to look at Aemon, who was staring at the statue and the city. "Come on, Aemon, it's about time," he said, as he stood up from his seat. "What?" Aemon asked, turning to face him. "The coronation." "Yes, and you are coming with me," Akas's smirked. Akas's didn't wait for Amon's response, as a burst of light appeared in front of them. Akas's and Aemon vanished from the airship as the light faded. Ads by PubFuture. In St. Milan, Trier, and Fanepotter, as well as major cities across the empire. Thousands of people packed the city squares. They came from all walks of life. They were extraordinary or ordinary, rich or poor. Their differences didn't matter at this historic moment. Even during this period when the gods were said to walk on earth, the gods still remained elusive and mysterious. There have been divine miracles of the gods recorded in history, but none on the scale that is about to occur. Dong, 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 dong. The bells of the churches of the eternal blazing sun began to ring throughout the empire. The scattered chiming sounds suddenly became coordinated. As the holy bells rang throughout the empire, they finally sounded in an order. The next moment, the blazing golden sun in the sky suddenly expanded and shone brightly. The rays of sun descended on the empire like veils of light. Image. In the square of Trier, a veil of light appeared and morphed into a curtain, which floated and shimmered before all. Similar scenes were occurring throughout the empire. The curtains flickered before revealing an image of 2 carriages traveling down the lane. In square of Fanepotter, a man holding the sun's emblem gazed at the divine miracle, his eyes filled with piety and his hands trembling with excitement. "Praise the sun," he chanted, breaking the silence that had fallen over the empire due to the divine miracle. His chant was like a spark that lit up a prairie. "Praise the sun, praise the sun, praise the sun." People chanted madly together, like a wave of tsunami across the empire, after witnessing the miracle. The entire northern continent trembled, and the sky seemed to be tearing apart when the clouds of the sky were swept away, as millions of chants filled every nook and corner of the empire. Under the brilliance of the sun, their eyes, which had been devoid of belief for a bright future, were finally lit up with a spark of hope. Chapter 69. His Anchors. Akas's sat in a chair on the balcony of a magnificent white castle, holding a palette and paintbrush, while a canvas was present on a wooden stand in front of him. He swirled his brush across his palette, mixing the paint into a bright golden color that glistened with particles of light, like stars in the cosmos. He took the glistening paint-stained brush to the painting on the canvas. The painting depicted a large city filled with densely packed houses and stone bridges that crisscrossed through houses and streets. A vast river flowed on the outskirts of the city, where ships emitting steam were docked at a port, while the blue sky was filled with numerous airships arriving from all over the world. At the center of it all, a colossal statue of a god stood. He was in a pure white robe, with a halo of light behind him. He held an open book with the symbol of the hermit in one hand and a balanced scale in the other. Behind the statue of the sun god, there was a bright golden sun. It emitted an endless rays of light, illuminating the city below. Akasis took the brush and pressed it against the golden sun in the painting. He stroked it, saturating the color of the sun and turning it into an almost blinding white star in the painting. The actual sun in the sky expanded, resonating with his strokes in the painting. The sun became extremely bright, resembling a white star. The rays of the sun then descended from the astral world onto the earth. The rays resembled veils of light that shimmered and swayed as they descended. Praise the sun! The chants of millions thundered under the divine miracle, while the other gods cast their gazes on Akasis. Akasis finished his painting with the final stroke on the light of the sun. He smiled and nodded to the gods. Then, he closed his eyes, his spirit began to expand and became one with the sun in the sky. His vision now encompassed everything, wherever the light shone, and he was also always present in the sunlight. He saw the vast astral world, as well as malevolent entities outside the barrier. They roared in sheer rage and anger, as the sun illuminated them, especially the crimson moon and brown Jupiter. Their roars, in particular, tore reality itself apart. He looked away from the barrier, ignoring the roars, and at the earth, passing through the northern and southern continents, while the area of the forsaken land of the gods and the western continent were hazy, as was the abyss in the oceans. Soon after, his vision suddenly faded into darkness, which began to be illuminated by golden stars of light that appeared within the darkness. He felt hope within each of the golden stars, and it was as bright as the stars themselves. Within a few moments, the stars had filled with darkness, like an ocean of light devouring darkness. Even when the darkness faded, the stars continued to appear. Akasis knew what the stars were. They were his anchors, which were multiplying at an exponential rate as the chants of millions filled his ears. Akasis finally emerged from his divine state and opened his eyes. His eyes had changed, and the indifference that had always been present in them had begun to fade. And the Creator's will in his body, which had become stagnant as a result of him controlling the hermit uniqueness, began to weaken as well. The divine miracle he performed served many purposes. Most importantly, he did it to remedy the damage to people caused by the war and disease. The consequences were far too severe. Imagine mountains of corpses covering the vast plains as far as the eye can see. Such scenes were common throughout the empire. The total number of deaths caused by the disease and war was 19 million. Such figures would have sparked outrage even in the modern world, let alone here, where the population is too small. The disease spread by the ascension of the cheek was extremely lethal, and people died within moments of being contaminated. And, even though the disease was finally eradicated from reality with his order, many people died in those few moments in between. Under the order of angels, the corpses of all those who had died were gathered and burned to ashes. Many people lost everything, including their loved ones and homes, as well as their will to live. As one would expect, the rate of suicides increased across the empire in the first week after the war and plague. The entire empire was also filled with a gloomy and negative atmosphere. Even though not all committed suicide, their hearts were broken when they considered the future. Many didn't know what they would face tomorrow, and the unknown haunted the hearts of everyone. They had lost hope for a brighter future. All of this even began to affect him and the other gods. Their anchors shook and dwindled day by day. Actually, Akasis already anticipated this at the meeting, which is why he told the broadcast at the time to them. After noticing the problem, Lilith, Baldiel, Harabergen, and others did not sit still. They immediately began trying to find a solution. While he and Ammonizes personally went to Artisan and pressed him to immediately release the majority of his inventions. Artisan had not intended to launch the majority of his inventions in this manner. His plan was to release them one by one over the course of several years. However, Akasis and Ammonizes made a valid point to him, telling him that in light of the dire situation, the people need something to look forward to. Akasis anticipated that the situation would improve slightly with the advent of the Industrial Revolution. It did, but the majority of citizens, especially the poor and middle classes, will still unable to benefit from the magnificent inventions of steam for a long time to come. Here is where he decided to seize the opportunity and perform the miracle. Even if people have lost hope and fallen into darkness, they will still yearn for the light. Furthermore, by broadcasting the entire coronation live, the majority of the empire's common people will be able to witness the process, which they may never be able to do on their own. It took their focus away from the tragic past and towards the bright future ahead. Novel in .c ohm. He planned to give them hope. He succeeded in the end. He must also admit that faith is a very powerful concept. Even he wasn't expecting such successful results in the end. He now enjoys the benefits that he earned. The gains were that his anchors believers, which is now increasing at an astronomical rate. When the War of Four Emperors erupts, having stable anchors will be crucial. The War of Four Emperors will not be as quick as the previous one, it may last centuries. At that time, the gods will almost certainly try to attack their enemies' anchors. He didn't want to risk losing his anchors at that time, which is why he was preparing for the war ahead of time. Finally, his fading humanity was almost restored with the rise of the anchors. He expected this, but he did not anticipate the previously stagnant will of the Creator in him to resume waning. Even though it is slow, it makes a significant difference. Anchors, Akas's thought, smiling. His eyes also glowed brightly. His plan is not without any consequences. The anchors of the other 5 gods should have been affected because many people changed their beliefs to him due to the miracle. Akas's, on the other hand, was not concerned that they would come knocking at his door for a battle or an explanation. He already gave them a chance when he told them in the meeting that they could help with broadcast if they wanted. But none of them offered assistance, which surprised him somewhat, as he expected Lilith, Ammonizes, or Heribergen to come forward. Akas's drank his cup of coffee on the balcony, his mind racing with chaotic thoughts. That is surprising. His pupils suddenly narrowed as he gazed at the curtain floating before him, which showed the 2 carriages coming to a halt in front of the royal palace. Chapter 70, Coronation, Backland, Northern Continent. The day had finally come. The streets of Backland were packed with people, all of whom wore expressions of curiosity, excitement, and anticipation. A gigantic white castle towered in the center of Backland. It stood there emitting a divine aura, as if it had been conjured from a fantasy of God. It was perfect in every sense of the word. The white castle had lofty towers that were made out of blue marble, as were the spires that held the symbols of the 6 gods on them. Every stone in the castle was even and square, as if the builders were obsessed with perfection, as if they truly loved what they created. Image here. Around the castle were colossal statues of the 6 gods, whose divine radiance added to the surreal atmosphere of the castle. While thousands of people packed in front of the castle inside a vast square within the gate, awaiting the arrival of the future kings. Numerous demigods stood in lines on both sides of the gate, stretching all the way to the castle stairwell. The demigods made certain that no one obstructed the path from the gate to the castle, which was covered in blue carpet. Image here. Creak. The gate opened as the bustling crowds fell silent, their gaze drawn to the gate with anticipation. A carriage came to a halt in front of the gate, the horses neighing. The escorts following went forward and opened the carriage door. Trunsoest walked out, dressed in white royal robes and carrying a coronation mantle over his shoulder. He wore a solemn expression, but it couldn't hide the nervousness and excitement in his eyes. He then turned to face his carriage and extended his hand. Another pure white hand appeared and clasped his, as a beautiful woman walked out of the carriage. Image here. She wore a long red gown and her hair was curly black. She had a black veil over her face, concealing her otherworldly beauty. The woman was Aurnia, the goddess of beauty. She is the current sanguine queen and one of the survivors of the second epoch. She had been a subordinate god to the sanguine ancestor, Lilith, until her untimely demise. Aurnia went to shoulder the burden of leading the entire blood race. The blood race is one of the mythical races that still exists and thrives, whereas the others have all died. This, in and of itself, demonstrates her capability as a queen to all. As a result, she was given the honorific title, Queen of the Blood Moon. On the balcony, Akas's peered through the veil of Aurnia gazing at the face of the woman regarded as the most beautiful of all. However, compared to Lilith, she is nothing. Akas's mused, "Oh Lilith, I didn't expect her to move so quickly. She really decided to bet on Trunsoest. Well, only if she knew." Under the light of the sun, Trunsoest and Aurnia locked their hands in front of the gate. They waited for the other 2 and the angels of the 6 gods rather than entering the gate right away. Soon after, another carriage arrived, and Alitsa Tudor emerged from it, as the door opened. He was dressed in red royal robes, with a coronation mantle draped over his shoulder. He looked up at the massive palace, his eyes gleaming. Then he reached into the carriage as a woman emerged, grasping his hand. The woman wore a sleeveless silver gown and had silver hair that reached her hips. Her stunning beauty accentuated her facial features even more. Her poise and grace were undeniable, while her warm and compassionate eyes sparkled like the stars of the cosmos. Ads by PubFuture. Image here. She was the famous Sylvia Abraham, granddaughter of Mr. Door. She, unlike the rest of her family, was not a meander of the Door pathway, but rather of the Wheel of Fortune pathway. Her honorific name is Lady of Silver. Trunsoest and Tudor stood next to each other, while Sylvia smiled at Aurnia, who nodded politely in response. The four of them stood there, not entering. While looking at the castle, their expressions become solemn. Then, under everyone's exclamation, a beam of pure light descended from the sky, morphing into 7 figures with angelic wings behind them. The angels were all from the churches of the 6 gods, and they were all holding flags with scared emblems of their gods. Blaze Larson, Angel of Miracles, held the flag of the eternal blazing sun. An archangel stood in front of the 6 angels, dressed in a pure white robe and holding a flag with an emblem depicting a balanced scale and a sword together. Image here. She was none other than Diana, Angel of Wisdom, holding the flag of the Tudor-Turnoist United Empire. When they arrived, a solemn and high music resounded from the White Castle, echoing across backland and continent. Diana took a breath and marched forward, her posture straight and her expression dignified, to the music. The angels marched forward as well, following her into the gate, holding the flags of their gods. Seeing this, Trunsoest and Aurnia finally walked through the gate and onto the silver carpet, preceded by angels of gods. Then, with a smile on their faces, Alitza and Sylvia came in last. Creak. As they all entered, the gate closed. Thousands of cheers rang out across the square as angels and kings walked down the blue carpet towards the White Castle, while colorful silk pieces cut from flowers and brocades filled the sky and fell on them. People were chanting the names of the Trunsoest and Alitza as they waved their hands at their subjects with a graceful smile on their faces. Aurnia was silently walking forward, with no intention of responding to the cheers. Meanwhile, Sylvia, with the poise of a queen, waved her hands with her future husband. More than the future kings, she caused an uproar among the crowds with her warm smile. They all arrived at the white stairs and began slowly climbing to the top, under the watchful eyes of the entire empire. They finally came to a halt in front of the massive white door, as the angels entered with music echoing in the background. Trunsoest entered the door, holding the hands of the Aurnia, who was still indifferent. "Come on, Sylvia." Alitza smiled as he noticed her pause in the path. Sylvia nodded and turned to face the people behind her, waving her hand to them one last time. Her simple action heightened the raucous applause, trembling the very capital. Ads by PubFuture. She then turned to face the front, clasped hands with Alitza, and entered the castle as well. Boom! As a massive curtain of light appeared before the White Castle, showing the coronation hall to all the people, the door of the White Castle closed. Acaces was now finishing his next painting on the balcony, which depicted Sylvia waving her hand to the people of the empire one last time. Image here. He also knew that this painting would go on to become one of the most famous and popular paintings in the world. He named it, Queen of the Silver Moon. This painting came out much better than I expected. Acaces admired the painting. While he was not going to take this to his divine kingdom, he will pass it on to his angels, who will most likely display it. Bethel Abraham and Silva Abraham. As he looked at Sylvia, his pupils narrowed. He finally sighed and returned his gaze to the curtain before him. Inside the magnificent hall, angels from all over the empire gathered under a single dome at the castle's tallest tower, which nearly reached the clouds. Tudor and Trunsoest stood next to each other on the dais, surrounded by everyone. Behind them were their consuls, who chose to serve them in the governance of the United Empire. The consuls of Trunsoest were Sauron, the Conqueror; Castia, Lady of Order; William Augustus, Hand of Order. The consuls of Tudor were Aemon, son of Creator and Angel of Time; Antigonus, son of Phlegre and Attendant of Mysteries; Bethel Abraham, Mr. Door and Guide to the Endless Cosmos. Soon, a divine aura enveloped the entire hall, as the tower's walls and dome faded from reality, exposing the hall to the world. As the statue of the 6 gods that surrounded the castle became visible to all, the hall rose above the clouds, with white clouds floating right beneath the floor. The eyes in the statues of the 6 gods were lit up with light, as they gazed down on the open hall. The sudden movement of the statues even caused the entire continent to tremble slightly. Image here, a burst of light erupted in dais, where the tutor and Trunsoest were standing with their consuls, as Lucas appeared out of the light, dressed in papal robes. Ads by PubFuture. In the golden light of the sun, that glazed the entire hall, Lucas began to walking to the east, west, northern and south of dais. On each side, Lucas called for the recognition of the sovereign, with the words, "Sirs and madams, I hereby present upon you, Alitsa Tutor and Trunsoest, your undoubted kings. Wherefore all of you who are come to this day, to pay homage and service, are you willing to do the same?" After the angels acclaimed him on each side, Lucas started to walk to the tutor and Trunsoest to administer an oath to the sovereigns. The power of night descended just then, bringing silence to the hall, capital, and empire. Lucas spoke, addressing both of them. "Is your majesty willing to take the oath?" His voice rang out across the empire, which had been silenced by the power of the night. "I am willing," Tutor and Trunsoest answered solemnly. "No vel b in c om." Lucas began as an aura of order emanated from him. Then he asked them, "Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Empire according to their respective laws and customs?" "I vow to do so." Tutor and Trunsoest acknowledged. Lucas continued, "Will you do everything in your power to see that order and justice, in mercy, are carried out in all your judgments?" "I will." Tutor and Trunsoest vowed under the gazes of the gods. Lucas asked, "Will you to the utmost of your power maintain the order of gods? Will you to the utmost of your power maintain in the religions of the 6 gods established by order? Will you uphold and preserve inviolably of the Church of 6 gods, as well as its doctrine, worship, discipline, and government thereof, as by order established in United Empire? Will you ensure the peace and prosperity for the people under the power bestowed upon you by the gods?" Tutor nodded, while Trunsoest took one last look around, pausing on the figure of Aurnia, who smiled and encouraged him. Then, they looked up at the statues of the gods that towered above them all. "All this and those promised before, I vowed to do so. So, help me God." Their oath resounded around the world, etched in the fog of history of the Saphira Castle and be forever intertwined with endless information and knowledge of the spirit world. In the dais, Lucas presented a thick holy Bible to them with words spoken. "Here is the wisdom, this is royal order, these are the lively oracles of God." Following this, Tutor and Trunsoest proceeded to sit on 2 thrones present in the dais. Then, Castia and Aemon approached them and presented them with the Sword of Order, which they placed on their thrones. With that, a choir sang, resounding across the empire, as the final and most important part, crowing, began. The power of night also faded as music and cheers filled the empire. Diana and Einhorn entered the dais, holding gold crowns adorned with diamonds on the brass pillow. Following them, Artisan entered the dais, and Bethel also began walking towards the thrones. They finally stood before them, as Artisan and Bethel lifted the crows from pillows and prayed in ancient Hermes, "O God, the crown of the order, bless we beseech thee and sanctify thy our king, and thou dost this day set a crown of pure gold upon his head, so enrich his heart with abundant grace and crown him with all princely virtues, throughout the known land and sky." The crowns were then placed on the heads of Tutor and Trunsoest by Bethel and Artisan. The angels in the hall rose from their seats and cried out in unison, as they were crowned, "God save the kings." The chant spread like wildfire throughout the empire, filling every nook and corner. "God save the kings! God save the kings!" As the holy bells of the churches rang out across the empire, the citizens feverishly chanted together like waves of a tsunami. The coronation came to an end in front of the entire world, forever etched in the annals of history. In the presence of God and man, Tutor and Trunsoest had finally ascended to their royal thrones.